78.4, the podcast that helps you leave a godly legacy for future generations by showing you incredible things God has done in the lives of men and women around the world. If He can do those things in these people's lives, imagine what He can do in yours. I'm Bob.
And I'm Matt. So today we're going to talk about fear and what role fear kind of plays in the life of a Christian. Now, do you know how many times it says do not fear in the Bible? Just offhand.
Well, I know that the memes say it's 365, but that's not true.
All I had was over 80, but either way, that's a lot of times. That's
Right.
a lot of times. And yet, we're often afraid. There's lots of things that people fear. We fear not having enough money to help our families out. We fear death. My wife is deathly afraid of cockroaches. My worst, I think, is, you know how much I love movies.
Right.
I cannot watch a horror movie.
Oh, come on.
And yet I do. I do.
Okay, that makes sense.
But I have to have a hand in front of my face the entire time. In fact, I was at the movie Us recently. And I must have looked like an idiot if anyone noticed me, because the entire movie, my hand's in front of my face, peeking. I peek through my fingers because I can't handle the pop-outs. I can't handle the anticipation of what is about to happen. So the question is, why? Why are we afraid?
Why do you pay to
What
make
do I
yourself
pay to make myself afraid in that case? But is it okay to be, as a Christian, is it okay to be afraid? If God says do not fear, are we doing something wrong when we fear? So today, to help answer that, we're going to hear from three people and how they dealt with fear in their lives in the light of being a Christian.
First up is Joanne Austin. Now, for years, she and her husband, John, worked with students in the United States and in Africa. And after that, they held various leadership positions with Campus Crusade for Christ crew. They've had a lifetime of seeing God do amazing things. But there's one story where Joanne's world was kind of rocked. And, well, let's listen to it.
We had a situation where John had traveled to Abidjan for, I think it was a regional director's meeting or something. And while he was gone, during the night, we had thieves. The children and I slept through everything. We had terrazzo floors in that house, so you can't hear a thing. If someone gets in and is barefoot, you don't hear any noise. No creaking wood floors or anything. So I never knew we had thieves in the night. In the morning, our dog, who was always outside, was waiting at my bedroom door. There were hand marks on the walls leading partway up the stairway and waiting in the land. And they made it as far as the landing. That's where the hand marks on the wall stopped. But so I wake up in the morning and open my bedroom door, and there's the dog. And I thought, Cinnamon, what are you doing in my house? You're supposed to be outside. There he was. And so I come down the stairs, and I see basically kind of an empty house. I mean, they had, in those days, it was the time when Ghana was, it was at a really low point, and everything was of value. And they had pretty much, I mean, they had taken curtains off the windows, pictures off the wall. We had cushioned furniture. They had taken the cushions. They had rolled up the carpet. They took a bunch of stuff, but they didn't get everything there was to get. They didn't get things from my kitchen, some things from a storeroom. But anyway, I was just in such shock that that had happened. And then John came home later that morning. He flew in that morning. And we had wonderful Christian friends who came around us, both Ghanaian and the mission community and whatever, and loved on us and prayed for us and comforted us and were helping us think through how to replace the things that were taken. But the main thing about that little incident was that this band of friends, we all just together prayed just for God's peace and His protection over us. And I just envisioned these angels around our home. And so I felt safe. But we don't sleep real well for the next couple of nights. You're kind of listening a little bit. And John had taken one of the children, our son's baseball bat, and just had it handy in our bedroom. 2 nights later, we heard a little clink downstairs. And we had, all our windows were louvered windows. And so you hear this clink when all the windows open. And we both knew someone's downstairs. So John gets his baseball bat, opens the door, and again, with these terrazzo floors and stairway, no one, whoever was downstairs would never have heard him. And he gets all the way down the stairs. He sees one of the thieves, and John, at that point, he thought, well, I can either clobber the guy because his back is to me, and I could probably kill him with this bat. But for some reason, at that instant, he decided to take the bat and just bang it on the terrazzo floor. And it made such a loud popping sound in this now empty house that everything is just echoes, that the guy just leaped up and then slithered through that little space that he had, because he was a little guy. And he got through there. John couldn't have gotten through there, not that he would have wanted to try to chase him. But now came the problem for me, because I had imagined these angels all around us. And somehow the thieves got through that band of angels, and God let them come the second time. What that did for me was, I thought, God, I can't trust you now. Now what am I going to do? Because you let the thieves come after we had prayed, and I was just so sure that we were going to be, we were protected. They never tried to touch us. But I didn't feel safe anymore, and I didn't feel like I could trust God. And so I could trust him in any other area, and we proceeded with our ministry, and God did, we were able to replace, the stuff that was taken through friends and however we got stuff, because that wasn't the important thing anymore. Now it was, I can't trust you, God. And in that area. And so, I just wasn't sleeping well at night. And within that year, we moved from Ghana to Liberia. And it was very interesting that my fear went with me to Liberia. And we were living in a different housing situation where instead of having these, 1-inch circular bars across the windows, now it was this kind of netting thing. And I thought, oh my land, how easy is that to get into? Bars is one thing, but this netting, anybody can get into a house with netting. It was metal, but it was pretty easy. It would be easy to cut that. And we lived in a house that had wood floors, so every creak, and we had a tree that touched the roof. So any wind at night, every sound was a possible thief. And I'd say, John, I think I hear something. And he'd have to get up and check. And well, this went on. We lived in, we were in Liberia 3 years, but I don't know if it was a year or a year and a half into our time in Liberia when we came back to the States for a couple months. Well, then we were, nobody has bars over their windows in America. And I thought, oh, now anybody could break in. Just walk into a house in America. Just, it'd be so easy. My fear just kept moving with me until finally I got so tired of being fearful. And I got weary of not being able to trust God. Just in that one area. I was trusting him fine in every other area, but not that one. Anyway, God used the verse in 2 Corinthians 12, 9, and 10, where Paul talked about his thorn in the flesh. And he said, how God said, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is perfected in your weakness. And I realized that this lack of trust had become a weakness. It was like a weakness in my armor. Like there was this hole in my armor, and Satan just knew right where to attack. That was none of the other areas, I was fine trusting God in any other area, but this one thing of safety, I couldn't trust him. Well, that was another one of those transformation moments for me, because I could deal with that. I can deal with the weakness. It was like God was saying, Joanne, where you are weak, that's where you can experience my strength. And it was like, from that time on, I realized, okay, God, I can't handle this thing anymore, and it's a point of weakness. So whenever I feel fearful, I can give it to you, because you know what to do with my weakness. Now where I'm weak, I can experience your strength. And so it was revolutionary to me, but God did use that to do something in my life that was very strengthening ultimately to me in my faith.
I understand where Joanne's coming from in a lot of ways. Fear is something God gives us. It's very natural, and it's something God gives us as a protective mechanism.
Right. It's like a built-in sonar, like a red danger, at least that it's possible, that something is possibly worth worrying about right now.
Exactly. And you always hear the thing about fight or flight, whether the situation demands that you hightail it and get out of there because there's no way you can handle the situation, or you stand there and you fight it off. That's a good thing. But there's another option in there, and that's where you do nothing. accept worry, and it becomes paralyzing.
Yeah, paralyzing effect. Right. I don't think that when God's saying do not fear, he's talking about the mechanism he put inside of us originally, naturally. I think what he's talking about is after that, what do you do with that fear, with that sonar, that danger sign? Do you sit paralyzed? Do you run? Or do you do what Joanne did, which is, even within that fear, give it to God? I love that she boils down her fear to the phrase lack of trust. I think that's the key of what fear is, or the problem with fear. It's saying, I don't really, and she said it, she said every area she was cool with God, but she didn't really believe he was going to keep her safe. So the question is, do you really believe God's in control? And if you do believe God's in control, then you can get through the fear. If you don't, then you got a problem. So how do you fight that fear? What is the good kryptonite to fear? And that's where our next story comes in. If anyone has the credentials to help us understand how to fight fear, it's Jeff Struecker. He was an Army Ranger who fought in the Battle of Mogadishu, made famous in the movie Black Hawk Down. I mean, there's nothing scarier than seeing people killed right in front of you, bullets whizzing by your head. So let's listen to what Jeff has to say about fear.
I spent most of my adult life as a warrior in the Army, and the two things that I have personally spent more time thinking about and probably exposed to is death and fear. I was stationed with the Army's 75th Ranger Regiment for many, many years, an elite special operations unit. And my unit and a couple of others were thrown together at the last minute and sent to Somalia to go capture a warlord. And the seventh and final mission is the events of Black Hawk Down. And in the course of the first 10 or the 15 minutes, I went through, to this day, the most intense enemy gunfire I've ever experienced in my life. And within a matter of minutes of arriving back at the base, my commander was telling me, Jeff, you need to get your men back on your vehicles and drive back out into those city streets and see if there's anybody alive at the Durant crash site. And to this day, standing at the back of that Humvee, getting ready to go back out in the city streets is without question the most terrifying thing I've ever done in my life. And I was really grappling with not going back out there. But as a Ranger, I knew that I would totally be letting down my men. I'd be letting down the guys that are in the city streets who are fighting for their lives. And I knew I had to find some courage to go back out there and to do what probably was going to result in my death. And many young men that I've been with in the military, who are in some cases the most courageous guys that you'll ever see out there, there's this perception that in order for you to be really courageous, you don't have any fear. And I've tried to tell men, especially men, because men are really, really hesitant to ever admit that they have fear. I don't know what it is. I think it's a character flaw, to be honest with you. Every man deals with fear, and every man who's honest with himself and with others would say, hey, sometimes I'm really, really afraid and don't know how to handle the fear. And I try to challenge men especially to be really honest with themselves and really honest with God about fear, and try to tell them fear is not a bad thing. In fact, it's probably a good thing and can be a gift from God. Fear says this is a really serious situation, and I'm not just talking about getting shot at. I'm talking about health, I'm talking about your family, I'm talking about your finances, whatever it is. Fear says this is a really serious situation, and it's almost always attached to the unknown. And I don't know how the situation is going to turn out, and I'm afraid it's not going to turn out well. And I tell men, real courage is not the absence of fear. In fact, Hollywood's got it wrong. Real courage is the guy who is intensely afraid of the situation, but has the strength of character to get up and to do what he knows he has to do anyway. And then, not knowing how the circumstance is going to turn out, trust the results in God's hands. So if you really think about it for just a second, the opposite of fear is not courage. If fear has to do with the unknown, and if it has to do with doing what you know you have to do, the opposite of fear is faith. When you have faith in a God who is personally involved in your life, when you have faith in a God who superintends, who is sovereign over all of the affairs of man, when you have faith in a God who loves you enough to die for you and to provide for everything that you need here on planet Earth, the answer to any fear is faith in Jesus Christ. You put it in Jesus' hands. You trust it in Jesus' hands. You get up and do what you have to do next and trust the results there. And that is a man or a woman of great courage. In some cases, the most courageous people that I've ever met have not been warriors. They've been the mom who's done the right thing when she didn't want to, or the father who's got up and worked hard and diligently for his family, not knowing how the finances are going to turn out, or the farmer or the business owner who's afraid they're about to lose everything and still gets up and does their best anyway and trusts the rest in God's hands. That's the real answer to fear. And anyone can show genuine, real courage when they put their faith in Jesus. And I could literally look them in the eyes and say, hey, I know exactly what you're going through because I've been there and I got the t-shirt. And let me tell you how faith in Jesus makes a difference.
That's a great statement. The opposite of fear is faith.
My favorite too.
There's so much power in that and so much truth.
Yeah.
And it comes down to trust. Matt, you said something that struck me when you talked about you in horror movies.
Yes.
You said the thing that scares you is you can't handle the anticipation of what's about to happen.
Yes, horrifying.
Isn't that the essence of fear?
Right.
Not knowing what's ahead and wondering if you can trust God to carry you through it? Mm-hmm. That's the issue our next speaker faced. You may remember Jane Cook from our episode, Can God Work Through You? Well, long before she struggled with health issues, she was taking students on mission trips into difficult and potentially dangerous areas of Africa.
Right.
Talk about not knowing what's going to happen. Let's listen to how she faced fear and uncertainty.
I was one of the leadership on a project in Africa where we brought in about 14 students from the United States to spend a year in Kenya. They were all gung-ho for adventure. So one of the things we did was to get on a chicken bus, and we were going out to this Masai Boma, or village. Now, these young students were all gung-ho, but I had had a conversation with one of the Africans named Minyote, and he was afraid to go. And he told me why he was afraid to go. He was afraid to go because it hadn't been too long since they had stopped raiding his tribe and stealing the women and taking them back for wives. And he was terrified to go. And I thought, well, that doesn't really sound like I want to go there either. And the requirements for going was that you had to eat whatever they gave you. You had to drink whatever they gave you. These people drank sour milk with blood and urine in it. And at night, they went around in a circle, and you don't have to go, but if you're willing to abide by those boundaries, yeah, come on and go. So we went around the circle, and he started to the person with my left. Do you agree to these things? Yes, yes, yes. And as all these students thinking, oh, this is a great adventure. They don't know any of this stuff. And yes, yes, I am sweating bullets. I'm thinking, if I go, I might really regret it. But if I don't go, I'm really going to regret it. So the question keeps coming around to me, and I just take a deep breath and I go, yes. So I went out. We drove 2 hours through the bush, no road, to this Masai village. And we had the first Jesus film in Masai that we were bringing. We sat with the women. We'd sing a song in English. They'd sing a song in Masai. And it was just beautiful how the Lord connected us during that time. And then we showed the Jesus film. And it was the first time that Masai warriors had come forward to receive Christ. And so there was a big celebration that night. And by the way, only the men get the really good drink of the blood in the urine and the sour milk. So I didn't have anything to worry about, really. And actually, when we left the next morning, I was so sorry to leave. I was sad to say goodbye to these people. And I think the lesson is a lot of times in our lives, we face fears. We face unknowns. That was part of it for me. It was an unknown, but it was a fear. No matter if it's a little thing or if it seems like a mountain. We have a faith barrier in front of us. Now, this wasn't a huge faith barrier, but I think it's a principle that I've seen in my own life for almost any size faith barrier. I look at the situation and it looks insurmountable. And I say, God, can I trust you in this situation? Are you big enough for this situation? And I have to decide, am I going to trust him and say yes to what he's asking me to do? Or am I going to take the way out and say no? But I find that when I say yes and I face that fear, and if I trust the Lord through that fear, most of the time when I get on the other side, a lot of times I look back on it and I go, what was I afraid of? That wasn't so big. Because the Lord has taken me through and he has met me and he has worked in my life the way he wanted to work through that situation.
I love the question she asks, are you, God, big enough for this situation, this fear? And I think we all kind of have the same choice that Jane did around that campfire that night, to say, yes, I do trust God is big enough. But the question is, do I really believe that?
Yeah.
Do you believe that? Do you believe that God is in charge? When I do, there is no reason to fear anything or anyone. If I don't have that, I have every reason to fear and to fear God. So is God really in control? Are you okay with that? Are you okay with what he decides for your life? Are you okay with what he allows to happen to you in your life? And if you are, if you give that control, the God of the universe who knows the beginning from the end, not a bad idea to give it to that guy, to give your trust to that guy. He knows way more than we ever could. And again, if you don't know that, if you don't believe that, then that, I think, is where fear is. That's the answer, I think, to fear.
Joanne talked about that. Fear being a weakness, a lack of trusting God.
Right.
But she found strength when she learned to turn her fear over to God, to trust that he was going to take care of her and that he was true to his word. I think that's the biggest thing, is that he was true to his word.
Right.
Jeff reiterated that, saying courage comes from trusting the God who is sovereign and loves you. And Jane said it doesn't matter if it's a little thing or it seems like a mountain.
Right.
We have a faith barrier in front of us, and we have to choose. We have to choose to trust him.
Right.
It's a choice.
Mm-hmm. So that wraps up our latest episode on fear. We hope you enjoyed it.
If you would like to dig deeper into being free from fear, let me encourage you to check out our show notes. There you'll find some very helpful links to sites and articles that'll give you answers you're looking for.
Also, the audio you heard, as always, came from some of our more than 400 and growing videos on CrewLegacy.com. That's C-R-U Legacy.com. So check those out. And if you like today's podcast, please subscribe so you can hear more of them.
78.4 is a podcast of Legacy, a project of Crew.
Thanks for listening. Join us next week. And while we're away, we want to encourage you, as always, to remember that whatever God did in the lives of those you heard speak today, the same God can do it in you. So until next week, go out and continue the legacy.